My name is Jennifer, and I'm 24 years old. 3 years ago, my parents erased me from their lives like I had never existed, and I learned what it feels like to be alive yet invisible. Because one day they were calling me, their daughter, and the next day my number was blocked. My photos were gone from the walls, and my name became something they avoided saying out loud. And I didn't get a reason that made sense. Only cold silence that stretched into weeks, then months, then years. And after the shock faded, the pain hardened into something heavier, something that sat in my chest every morning when I woke up alone in my tiny studio apartment, wondering how a family could pretend their own child was a mistake. They'd corrected by deleting her. And I didn't beg after the first few unanswered calls because pride is a strange shield when you're wounded. And I told myself I'd survive without them, that I'd build a life so solid their absence wouldn't crack it. But the truth is I carried that abandonment everywhere like a shadow, especially when money was tight, when my fridge was nearly empty, when I worked double shifts and still couldn't afford rest. Because my parents weren't poor, they weren't struggling. They simply chose my brother over me, chose comfort over accountability, chose to erase me for 3 years and treat me like I never existed. And in that silence, I learned discipline, because nobody was coming to save me. And I learned hunger for success, because I never wanted to feel that powerless again. So I poured myself into work, into ideas, into nights where I slept 4 hours and woke up determined. And slowly, painfully, things changed, opportunities came, risks paid off, and the life I built didn't look like revenge, it looked like freedom. And that freedom eventually took a shape. I never imagined when I was counting coins for groceries, a sleek white yacht cutting through blue water, mine, not rented, not borrowed, earned inch by inch through years of being ignored. And standing on its deck for the first time, I didn't feel rich, I felt safe. Because for the first time in my life, no one could take my space from me. Or so I thought, because the universe has a twisted sense of timing. And just when I believed the past had finally loosened its grip, it came knocking with familiar voices and entitled footsteps. It was a quiet afternoon anchored near the marina, sun warm on my skin, salt in the air, when I heard commotion on the dock, raised voices, the scrape of luggage wheels, and before I could process the sound, I saw them, my parents, with suitcases, standing there like they belonged. Like 3 years of erasing me had never happened. Like I was still the girl whose room they could walk into uninvited, and the shock froze me. Because nothing prepares you for the people who abandoned you to suddenly show up on your private yacht with luggage. And my mother looked around approvingly. My father stepped forward like he owned the place, and in that moment, the exact words burned into my mind. Because this was real. This was happening. My parents erased me for 3 years. Treated me like I never existed. Then they invaded my private yacht with luggage, and the audacity of it stole my breath. And before I could even ask why they were there, my dad's voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding, saying I should move to the crew quarters because my brother needed the master suite. Like I was staff on my own boat. Like my success had automatically become family property, and I felt something inside me snap. Not loudly, not dramatically, but cleanly. Like a rope finally giving way under too much weight, and memories flooded back. Unanswered calls, birthdays alone, the way they'd chosen to forget me, and now here they were. Not apologizing, not explaining, but rearranging my life to suit my brother. And I realized they hadn't come to reconnect. They hadn't come because they missed me. They came because they found my yacht. Because my success had finally made me visible again. And the realization was colder than the ocean beneath my feet, because it confirmed what I'd feared all along, that to them I was only valuable when I had something they wanted. And as my father stood there waiting for me to obey, demanding space, demanding respect he hadn't earned, I understood this wasn't just a visit, it was an invasion. And whatever happened next would decide whether the girl they erased would stay erased, or whether the woman I became would finally draw a line they couldn't cross. The silence after my dad told me to move to the crew quarters stretched so long I could hear the water lapping against the hull. And instead of answering right away, I looked at their faces, really looked, at my mother scanning the yacht like she was evaluating a hotel room, at my father's impatient jaw, at the way my brother avoided my eyes while already acting like the master suite belonged to him, And in that moment, something inside me settled, calm and heavy, because I finally understood that they hadn't changed at all. Only their target had. And when I told them this was my yacht and nobody was moving anywhere, my father's expression hardened and he laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he couldn't imagine a world where I said no to him. And that laugh turned into anger fast, sharp words spilling out about family loyalty, about everything I owed them, about how without them I wouldn't even exist. And that's when he shifted tactics, because entitlement always does when it meets resistance. And he said it plainly, bluntly, without shame, demanding cash instantly, saying that if I had money for a yacht, then I had money to help my family, that I should transfer a large amount right now, not later, not after talking, right now. And hearing that demand felt surreal, because this was the same man who erased me for 3 years, who didn't answer my calls when I was drowning, now standing on my deck demanding money, like it was overdue rent, and I realized this was the real reason they came. Not the yacht itself, not reconciliation, but the proof that I had something worth taking. And when I refused, when I said no again, clearly, firmly, the atmosphere changed completely. Voices rose, accusations flew. My mother cried about how ungrateful I was. My brother finally spoke, saying I was selfish for not sharing what I had. And that word selfish cut deep because it ignored every lonely night, every sacrifice, every moment I survived without them. And I told them the truth, that they didn't get to erase me for 3 years, treat me like I never existed, then show up and demand cash instantly just because my life finally looked good from the outside. And my father's face twisted with something ugly, something mean, and he said I'd regret this. That family was everything and I was throwing it away. And for a brief second, the old pain flared. That child part of me that still wanted their approval, but it faded just as quickly, replaced by clarity. Because family doesn't abandon you until you're useful again. And I told them they needed to leave. Not tomorrow, not after dinner now. And when they refused, when my father crossed his arms and said I couldn't make him, I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I called Marina Security. And while we waited, the yelling continued. My mother accusing me of humiliation, my brother muttering about how unfair this was, my father demanding cash one last time like if he said it enough I'd cave. And when security arrived and asked them to step off the yacht, the shock on their faces was almost comical, like reality had finally caught up with their fantasy. And as they were escorted away, luggage rolling back down the dock the same way it came, my father turned back and said this wasn't over, that I'd come crawling back. But when they were gone and the dock was quiet again, I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief, a deep, full breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. Because for the first time I chose myself without apology, and standing there alone on my yacht I understood something powerful. That success doesn't heal old wounds unless you protect it. That boundaries aren't cruelty, they're survival. And that being erased taught me how to stand without leaning on people who only love you when it benefits them. And later that night, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the water turned gold, I thought about how close I came to giving in, how easy it would have been to hand over cash just to avoid conflict, and how that would have erased me all over again. And I promised myself I'd never do that. Not for them, not for anyone, because the girl they erased grew into a woman who owns her space, her time, and her worth. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever been ignored, used, or demanded to give more than you received, then stay with me, because there are more stories like this.